Among the most pressing threats to our survival and quality of life, water security sits atop the list as the single greatest climate challenge the world will face over the next decade. And while the Romans, Chinese, and Egyptians triumphed with application of water infrastructure nearly 4,000 years ago, the same pipelines and aqueducts we've relied on is woefully equipped for modern-day hydrogeology, impacted by decades of climate change and heavy use. While daunting, it has never been more important to invest in infrastructure innovations to turn the tide.
What is the most fundamental, basic human right to any population, whether it be here domestically in the US or around the globe? It's water. I served in tribal government from 2003 to 2021. And the last 4 years of which I spent as the tribal chairman. During that time period, we had 2 hurricanes, an ice storm, historic flooding, and then of course COVID. So imagine that occurring all in a 4-year time period. The issues of climate change and global weather conditions and the environmental concerns that we see now will continue to increase. We simply can't ignore it, and we can't defer to the next generation. The time is now to do something.
Water infrastructure is so important. It makes sure that we do provide good quality of life for our residents. The negative impact of not having adequate water infrastructure is when someone calls you and said, "Mayor, my living room is about 4 feet of water right now. It came right out the street." When you have children with 2 or 3 bottles in their backpack because there's no water, that's when you pay attention.
For so many of us, we don't think about it. We don't understand all the infrastructure that is required to make sure that when you turn on the tap, clean water comes out of the tap. In California, we have a tremendous need for more housing. I think one estimate is that we are 3 to 4 million homes short. Well, you can't build housing without water. We're not really thinking long term. When we had the drought a few years ago where you had communities without water, not able to wash their clothes or themselves. And what people don't realize is that when you have a drought and you have people who are dependent on wells for their water, what's happened over the last few decades in terms of fertilizer runoff and then aquifers being drained, the water becomes contaminated. And not everybody can go buy bottled water. So this is really an issue about justice. How do we ensure that everyone in California has access to clean water? The issues of access to water and food, those are the conflicts of the future.
The fact is, we have the same amount of water on the planet today that we've had for 4 billion years. And it just changes shape. It's no longer falling as predictable snowmelt where it used to fall for the last several thousands of years, right? It's now falling as rain further south. The access to clean water is going to be the single greatest challenge faced by many, many communities over the next 10, 20 years because we don't have the infrastructure to capture and harness and treat and store rainwater. Our entire water infrastructure was built around snow, not rain.
People need to pay attention to something they take for granted because it may not always be there. There are so many different aspects to managing California's water supply. It's up to some of us to actually convey to the broader public, hey, you need to pay attention to this. And it can't just be those with the most money or the loudest voice or the greatest political power, because we know from history that that doesn't usually work for the rest of society. It works for a few, not for all of us.
You might not think of the Mojave Desert as a place where you would find a lot of water, but in fact, it's got 30 to 50 million acre-feet of water in it. The origins of Cadiz were back in the 1980s. The founders of the company used NASA satellite imaging to identify the patterns on the surface of the desert that showed there was a prolific water resource under the ground. The top of the watershed are the high desert mountains, the New York mountains, the Providence mountains. It takes 1,000 years for water that fell as snow in the New York mountains to percolate down through the ground and make its way down to Fenner Gap. And as it leaves Fenner Gap, it goes to the dry lakes where it all evaporates. Cadiz was a railroad stop, multiple railroad lines, multiple gas pipelines that were built many years ago. Being able to use pipelines that are already in the ground, convert them to be able to carry water, not only does it preserve water from evaporation, but it allows us to move water hundreds of miles without having to build any new infrastructure other than pumping stations. You couldn't build a 200-mile pipeline today if your life depended on it. So by tapping into some of the unused pipelines that we can convert to carry water is climate adaptation at its best.
There's an opportunity here that is finally in a position to be realized. It couldn't come a moment too soon. It's like that critical for California's future.
Cadiz has really taken on an inclusive and collaborative approach, which includes Native Americans and indigenous communities. Here's an opportunity to transform Native American tribes, to offer them water security, good, clean, safe drinking water. I'm very proud to support tribal nations that can take ownership of one of the largest major water infrastructure projects in the southwestern United States. That is so exciting to me.
It is our job as elected officials to improve the quality of life for our residents. One of the biggest problems communities like mine have is that without the water supply, we can't really affect the water rates. Once the supply comes in at a reasonable cost, it can be passed over to the ratepayer. And as a result of the supply, that's how it dictates the price. We have a great community, but people are still suffering from high utilities, and water is one of the major ones. So this is going to make a big difference in the water rates. I tell you, I am enjoying working with Cadiz. They get it.
My interest in agriculture and water really stemmed because I'm from a farmer family. When I first learned of Cadiz, it really responded to issues that I care deeply about in novel ways. Having gone to Mexico at early days where you really could not drink the water. I know that these issues continue to be present even here in California, in modern day California, in communities across the state. Cadiz is in a position to be able to demonstrate that you can make a return for investors, but also serve a public good.
The Mojave Groundwater Bank will be the largest operating groundwater bank in the southwestern United States. These communities that don't have a lot of money, they don't have access to infrastructure, they can't wait to go apply for government grants, they're the ones on the front lines of climate change. And our company has the ability to make a real impact and really change the lives of thousands and thousands of people in the southwestern US. So I can't think of a better thing to do with the rest of my career, but to make this a reality.
Cadiz, dedicated to delivering clean, reliable, and affordable water. To learn more, visit CadizInc.com.